Welcome to the Theo Therapist Podcast, where theologically trained, licensed therapists share health and healing conversations. Join our host, Dr. Trice for conversations about real-life issues from both theological and therapeutic perspectives.
Hi, welcome to the Theo Therapist Podcast. I'm Dr. Trice, host of the Theo Therapist Podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of having one of my really good friends join today. Her name is Reverend Geralds. She's an LPC and a CPCS. All those letters behind her name basically saying that she is the bomb. She knows what she's doing, and she is definitely committed to the field of mental health and wellness. And so I am so honored to have her as a guest. We've been trying to get to this date for a while, and this is the appointed time.
Yes.
And so I'm thankful for it. I want to kick us off with a little bit of bio, just so you know more about Reverend Geralds. She is a licensed minister, a preacher, a teacher, a clinical practitioner. She's a chaplain and a licensed professional counselor. Now, if that's not a laundry list enough, right? I know she's an awesome auntie because I see it on Facebook. She holds a master's degree, a dual master's degree, one in clinical mental health as well as in a Master of Divinity from Mercer University and McAfee School of Theology at Mercer University. She, like myself, is bivocational, meaning that, we're not serving in just one capacity, we have multiples. So she's the Assistant Director of Counseling and Psychological Services here at Mercer University. But in addition to that, she also has her own practice. She is a practice owner. She has a mental health practice called Begin Again Counseling, Coaching, and Consulting Services, LLC. With all of that going on, she's still called to be a servant. She's an associate minister at Ray of Hope Christian Church. And so I am so happy that Erica's with us today. This is an opportunity for us to share on a topic that's kind of close to both of us. It's not a topic I think we prefer to be close to us, but it is one that is close to us for very real reasons. So particularly in honor of Mental Health Month, and the fact that this podcast will debut on Father's Day. The topic for today is grieving the loss of a father. And we happen to be in that unique dynamic that we're in the number. Yes, who have lost their father. And actually our fathers died within a month of each other.
Yeah.
And so we both have been doing kind of a parallel grieving process as far as dealing with the loss of a father. And so today, the hope is that in something that's being said, either in our own experiences or in the information that we share, that it's going to help someone that's listening, someone that's watching, navigate what this is like and find some new ways to cope.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Trice, for having me on today. Mercer University is what brought us together, but God knew that this would be a divine connection for us to be able to come together as we have this very important topic talking about the loss and the grief of our fathers. Again, that was not something that we both would have planned, but have been on this journey. And so I'm so delighted to be here to talk about grief, to talk about the impact, the importance of our relationship with our fathers, and also talk about men's mental health. So thank you so much for having me on today.
I'm so glad that you're here. Before we kind of dive into our topic of the day, I always ask every Theo therapist that comes on this podcast, how'd you get here? In other words, this is such a unique combo to have training in theology and also have training in mental health. And that we live in this unique space where we have to find the intersection points because they aren't readily available.
That's true.
You don't just necessarily see the connection points between having a master's of divinity and a master's in counseling. What brought that integration to you? Like what drove you to kind of come and connect these two?
Well, one of the important things that is important to me is my faith. And in the Bible, many times the question was asked, do you want to be made whole? Do you want to be healed? Do you want to be well? And looking at that, I realized that, particularly in the African American community, oftentimes we lean on our faith. but we didn't look at other aspects, so we could look at other aspects of how to be well a little bit better. So as a minister of the gospel, I began to look at that in my own way of taking care of myself, first of all, was not just through my faith, but also holistically, taking care of my mind, my body, my spirit, and my soul. And because I had been introduced to therapy later in life, I had gone through grief, since we're talking about grief today, at a young age. But it wasn't emphasized to me at that age to get therapy. I didn't process the grief, the loss that I experienced. Two very important deaths when I was younger, which was my sister, my twin sister, matter of fact, and my mother. Both at the age, one at the age of 9 and the other one at the age of 12. No one said, maybe she should get into counseling, or maybe she should receive therapy. I didn't get introduced to that until I was an adult. And I wanted to help other persons not wait so long to get the help that they needed. So in bridging, what was two things that were very important to me, my faith and also the support that I received with therapy. As a leader, we often say that ministers need another minister or pastors need a pastor. Well, I live in this concept that we also need a therapist, because we have so many things that we are working through to be made well, to work through our physical health. We're very familiar with how to attend to that, which is most people, we talk about exercises and dieting. But one of the aspects that I found that was missing was getting therapy and attending to our emotional and mental health. And so that's one of the things that I have wanted to emphasize, why I thought it was important to bridge the gap, because I want to see our leaders healthy. I want to see women healthier, African American women, and I want to see our churches healthier as well.
You know, that's such a big passion of mine as well. The first episode of this podcast was, I Need Jesus in the Bear.
That's correct.
Because it's so important, right?
It is so important that it's okay to pray about it. It's okay to lean on your faith, whatever that may be for you. It's okay to talk to other people, but it's okay to have a therapist as well. And so we want to normalize that conversation, that this is normal. If I break my arm, then I go to the doctor, I go to a physician. We want to normalize this conversation that if you as an individual, or you as a family, or your child needs therapy, that we normalize getting help in that area.
And I'm so glad that we get an opportunity kind of in our day-to-day, because we have another connection point.
Yes.
I have been a college counselor in the past. I'm currently a college counselor.
Yes.
And we get a chance to work with first-generation students sometimes who haven't been to counseling.
Have not been no one in your family has been to counseling as well. So it's not even them. It's also, they're the first ones to take that brave and courageous step to say, hey, I'm going to get help. I'm going to receive counseling. And oftentimes from them getting counseling, if they impact someone in their family or friend, to say that it's okay to get therapy, and becomes where they're not only helping themselves, but also other persons who are in their community as well.
They end up introducing it.
Yeah.
And usually, because we get that opportunity, I call it that honor of being their first entrance to mental health counseling, it also opens that door where they finally get a space where they can be vulnerable and be open and be real.
Right.
That they haven't had all their life.
That's so true.
And it makes a big difference.
It makes a difference. And I don't want to say that most persons, it is known that if they're going through a crisis, or they're going through grief or loss or transition, oftentimes they do go to their faith community. But now we want the faith community to be more equipped when they do come.
Yes.
And so we're getting trained in the area of mental health, because pastors are not able to do it all. And so oftentimes we're also a benefit for churches to say, yes, continue to go to your faith community, but we want to build that relationship between being a mental health clinician and also a part of the faith community. We want to bridge that gap. So we know that we're also a resource for persons to be able to come to as well.
And I know that we both try to bridge that gap. We're passionate about it.
Yes.
We've been on panels together.
Yes.
In the church setting.
Exactly. And I'm so happy to see faith communities talk about mental health more now.
Absolutely.
I'm so excited to see that we're talking about it more, even in the African American communities or persons of color. And so it's exciting. It's exciting times. This era of mental health is exciting for us to be able, because we want to be made well. We want our families to be healthier. We want our children to be healthier, and we want to be healthier. And so this conversation that we're having today, I'm so glad that we are continuing that conversation.
Exactly. Because I think if we don't continue to have these conversations, the stigma continues to exist.
Yeah.
And so we have to combat that stigma that, there's an issue with getting mental health care, or that, I'm too strong or I need to be strong.
Right.
There's strength in being able to be open and be vulnerable and allow yourself to be authentic.
Yeah, correct.
Strong.
Yeah. We need to, we want to destigmatize getting the support and the help. And so, as you said earlier, we want you to know that it's okay to reach out for help and to reach out if you need therapy, that it is okay.
Definitely. And so we have a guiding question for each of our podcasts today, with the topic being, grieving the loss of a father. The guiding question for this podcast, and it's pretty much just kind of the overall thought of what we want people to take away from this podcast, is how do you cope with the loss of a father or a father figure in your life? Because sometimes you may not have had a relationship with your father, but maybe there's a father figure, a grandfather, an uncle, a neighbor, a coach, someone who represented for you that father figure. And when that person is no longer there, there's an absence there.
Yeah.
And how do you navigate that? So many of us don't often have spaces to have these conversations about, what do I do with what I'm feeling that I lost? And sometimes we don't have supportive community.
That's so true.
To make this a conversation we can even have in family, or friend circle. And so I'm so glad that we're going to have an opportunity to at least hoping what that looks like for us.
Yeah.
I know that this is a complicated and difficult topic to a degree, but can you share a little bit about what your relationship with your father was like?
Yes. One of the things that is important for us to highlight as therapists, as clinicians, as ministers, is that we also, at times in our lives, need to receive therapy. And during this grieving process, that's exactly what I needed. I needed to first go to my therapist. My relationship with my father, we had a very, very close bond. It was almost about 2 years ago that my father died. However, it was also about 3 years after the tragic loss of the iconic basketball player, Kobe Bryant. And I don't know if you remember, but when Kobe Bryant died in that tragic plane crash, we also discovered that his 13-year-old daughter, Gianna, died as well. But from the experience of both of those losses, what went widespread across social media was highlighting the relationship between fathers and daughters. And we did #GirlDad. And so I connected very much to #GirlDad because my dad and I have a very close bond. And he, like I mentioned earlier, he was the father of girls. Now, I have brothers too, but we had a very special, unique bond. One of the things that's most unique about me is that I'm named after my father.
Oh, really?
So I'm very much like him. God must have known. It was divinely, it was a divine intervention, because I am the one that talks like him. I'm the one that walks like him. I'm the one that thinks like him, act like him. And so when I lost my father, I felt like there was a huge void. A huge piece of me was lost. Initially, I wasn't able to explain it. Not only was it about losing him as my father, but he was my last remaining biological parent. I mentioned earlier that I lost my biological mother. I'd also lost my biological grandparents. So there was a void, an emptiness that I could not describe. losing or not having that connection any longer. There have been persons who may refer to that as like being an orphan. I began to ask who was going to call me daughter. I no longer had the presence or the physical presence of someone to call me daughter. And so that felt very different than the other losses that I had experienced. And because he and I had such a close bond, I felt that emptiness. So the ways that I cope with his loss is that I began to try to determine how can I bring meaning to this loss. And so there have been different things that I've done to talk about the importance of the father-daughter relationship and it being loving and healthy. So I'm glad we're talking about this, particularly on Father's Day, is because fathers do matter. The representation of healthy relationships with their children matter. And so I won't try to allude that my father was perfect by any means.
He was human.
He was human, but he was present. I cannot remember a day in my life that my father wasn't present. And because of that presence in my life, I've always felt a sense of security, a sense of love, and a sense of protection that came from this bond that I had with my father. And so what that's been important to me, if I can briefly talk about, I kind of had the synopsis of some of the ways that I cope with the 5 C's. Is that okay?
Sure.
The first one would be in regards to grieving, just to compare or not to compare. You and I lost our fathers, but we can't compare our grief. How you were impacted by the loss of your father is very different, or could be very different, from how I grieve the loss of my father. And that's the same that goes with family members. Oftentimes, we want to compare our grief to other people.
Right.
But the way we grieve is very unique to the relationship. It's based on so many factors. And the reason why I say this, because one of the first phone calls, we talked about what not to say when someone grieves or when someone experiences the loss, and we go through that list. But I received a phone call. And the phone call, in a synopsis of it, is that right after, it was a week after my father's death. And I got this phone call. And the phone call wanted to emphasize the grief or the loss that his wife experienced. And he and his wife had been married for over 40 years. And I can acknowledge how painful and how sad she feels in losing her husband after that many years. But also it was compared to me as the daughter who had lost their father. As it needed to be an either or, not a both and. If we both experienced a loss and the pain of experiencing this person that we both dearly love. And my response to them is we don't have to compare our grief.
No one gets to dictate what our grief.
No one can dictate what our grief looks like. And I've had clients who said, I didn't cry like my brother or mourn like my sister, so people thought I didn't grieve. And we say, there is no particular way or right or wrong way to grieve. And so we don't have to compare our grief to one another. We all will grieve in our own unique way and to embrace and allow ourselves to grieve in that way. And so that would be the first C. The second C I would say is connect. Like you and I are connecting. Connect with community we're built for connection.
Right.
So in those times, it's important for us to stay connected. One of those persons you may need to connect to would be a therapist. Oftentimes, grief will cause us to isolate, right? I don't know about you, but who did you connect with? Like, I connected with my sister. I connected with close friends. I connected with persons in my church, like my pastor. They were a source of connection and community for me.
For me, a couple of things are important. I have a best friend who's also a therapist.
Yes.
So she unfortunately gets her connection points because she's a therapist.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she definitely began for me to kind of hear whatever I needed to say whenever I needed to say something. But the most connected I felt was at my father's funeral, which was, 2 hours away from here in a small city, a small town that he's from. And I showed up at the funeral. It was already a struggle day to come to the funeral. Yeah. I didn't ride in the family car. I was like, look, I just need my own space. I need to grieve however I'm going to grieve today. And 20 church members, different vehicles, with not cars, drove them. Elders and deacons and people who were in ministry with me and just others who loved on me. And they just came. They didn't ask for anything. They just surrounded me with a simple love.
Yeah.
And that still remains one of the closest connection points I've had.
Yeah.
At a time when I was at my very lowest, when I was, as they say, just trying to hold it together.
Yes. Yes.
They came. They didn't come seeking anything.
Yeah.
They just stood and surrounded and circled me with love.
Yeah.
And I think it's those memories of connection that remind me.
Yeah.
I have village.
Yeah.
If I need some,
Right.
all of those people
Yeah.
will come and be a part of it.
And we need that. And we need to allow, when we're grieving at our own comfort level, persons to be there for us. That embrace of community is what helps us cope.
Definitely.
That's one of the things that helps us cope. And one of the things that you said earlier was how you chose. Also, we get to choose.
Exactly.
I think it's important that when we're grieving, that we also get to choose. Choose what is best for us. And at that time, you needed to be surrounded by those members, by those persons to show you love. And I would say that for one of the things that I was able to do was I chose to allow myself to grieve. I chose it. However, I chose to be vulnerable. I chose to talk about my feelings. I chose to talk about my emotions. Because again, this was probably the first time in my life I knew how to grieve in a healthy way. And so I began to choose to say, it's healthy for me to, not only for my own feelings, but also to keep my memory of my father alive by talking about him and the relationship and the bond and the things that we enjoy together. So I think that it's important that no one else can dictate, like you said, how we grieve. We have to feel for ourselves.
I think we have to feel empowered enough to, this is our unique grief.
That's correct.
And because of our unique grief, we have got to walk through that journey. However we need to walk through that.
Yeah.
Right?
So true.
No one can dictate how long it takes. No one can dictate what it looks like. No one can dictate for us the impact that it has on journey. I've seen so many people go, all my friends are tired of hearing.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a burden to.
Yeah.
And I just remind people, but you get to grieve.
Yeah.
Whatever way you need to grieve. That's authentic to you.
That's authentic to you. And the way grief is, it's not predictable. It's unpredictable. It comes out of nowhere. That's right. It comes out of nowhere. You could be walking in the mall.
Exactly.
And smell a certain scent, and suddenly hits you, and you find yourself crying or in tears or laughing or whatever the memory might invoke an emotion. So it comes in waves. It's not linear. So it's like you said, no one can dictate because it's not predictable. It's unpredictable. But it's important for us to embrace those moments and to allow ourselves to grieve. And the other C that I add to what we've already is caring, is to care or self-care. It was important to continue to take care of myself. As helping professionals, we take care of everyone else.
And pour out so much
to other people, that I was intentional on how do I continue to care for myself as I'm continuously going through this grieving process. And so if I needed to take time alone, I took that time. If I needed to go for a walk, I took that time. If I needed to look at a comedy so that I can laugh or do something that I felt would help me through that moment, I did that and not felt like I had to continue going, because oftentimes we feel rushed through our grief. Society doesn't allow us to grieve.
Because it makes them uncomfortable.
It makes them uncomfortable. And so, but you can be intentional on how you care for yourself when you are grieving. And it was important for me to do that and to try to do it the best way I could in a healthy way.
And one of the things I think we both kind of have as chaplains is the benefit of having walked with people through grieving scenarios. And so we may know, some different things than other people about just kind of what that process might look like, stages of grief and things like that. That, there may be a time of denial and a time of anger and a time of bargaining and reasoning. This didn't really happen. A space perhaps of sadness, depression, and then, perhaps space of acceptance and newness. But even in that, it's not linear.
No.
It's not, this week is going to be this thing and I'm going to feel this next week.
Yeah.
And it can double back and it can, it can be cyclical. It can happen in so many different ways. And it can be 2 years from now and a memory comes back, or 2 years from now and, all of a sudden the conversation triggers.
That's so true.
A grief moment.
Yeah. Because there are so many facets of the grief process that there are times that things that happened during the time of my father's death, I do get angry. And I say, God, you got to help me with this. You got to help me forgive. You got to help me heal. Because I hate to say it, sometimes it can get messy. Let's do the reality of it.
Families.
Let's talk about the realities of that, okay? And so you have to work through all of those facets of when you have lost someone. And so, yes, there are moments where, like I said, it was so hard for me to believe, it still is, that I won't get an opportunity to talk or hear, like myself, my father's very deep voice, that we won't get a chance to have that hearty laugh together. So many things that we enjoyed together. Yeah, it's hard to believe at times that in the physical sense cannot take place. And so it is important that I continue to hold on to those fond memories. But I do have those moments where it's still like pinch me. It's hard to believe, And so those phases that you're referring to, yes, I've gone and continue to go in and out of those different feelings and emotions. That is a part of our normal aspect of grief. And like I said earlier, to help me process, I did consult my therapist, because again, there are times where it can be so hard. Grief can be tough, and it is tough, that you may need to seek professional help, whether that's your doctor, your primary care physician, whether that's your spiritual leader or a therapist or a psychiatrist, because there are times where we can't do this by ourselves, and we need to know that it's okay to reach out for professional help.
I want to bring up one other aspect before we kind of move with coping, is that some situations are more complicated.
Yeah.
My father had a chronic illness. So my father had ALS at the end of his life. And my father was a very vibrant man. He was a DJ in his free time.
Oh, right.
He was an Omega Sapphire man. He was very boisterous. I get all of my personality from him. And so toward the end of his life, though, it was watching his deterioration and his constant struggle for life. And so I think sometimes when there's this complicated bereavement, because not only do you have to deal with the loss of that person, but sometimes also maybe a sense of guilt for being thankful and relieved that they are not still suffering and that they're not still here. That's another layer.
It is.
It is that I don't want my loved one to suffer and continue to be here.
Right.
But now I have a guilt.
Yeah.
That in some ways I wanted that person not to have to keep it.
To be relieved of their suffering. And to have that is a normal response to grief.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes as caregivers, and again, you mentioned your father having ALS.
Mm-hmm.
My father suffered a severe stroke, which caused paralysis. And therefore, you both of us talking about our fathers, who we once knew to be these strong, boisterous men. And to see them kind of go through these changes, it's not easy to do so. We don't want to see our loved ones suffer. And also, caregiving can be tough. And sometimes we can feel like a sense of relief. They're not suffering, but also the relief of not having to go through the burden oftentimes, because it can be joys along with caregiving, but oftentimes it can be a burden after so many years. And oftentimes we don't want to talk about the reality of that is a response to loss.
Yes.
To feel at peace
Mm-hmm.
that my loved one is no longer suffering. And so we have to give ourselves permission to be okay that we feel this way. That sounds great. Yeah, give ourselves grace that is okay, that we don't no longer want them to suffer in that way. And I know that part of me, that's selfish, that we don't want to let them go. However, another part says, I'm so glad they're no longer suffering it in the way that was very difficult for not only them, but in some ways for the family as well.
As well. And often that doesn't get named because that's your feel, and a deep sense of guilt.
Yeah, deep sense of guilt.
But I think ultimately when you can release the fact that what is better is that they are not suffering.
That is correct.
Hopefully that gives some sense of relief to the person
Yeah.
who might be holding on to that.
Yeah, I think that can be very helpful in our own personal experience to share that if someone is holding on to that guilt, that it's okay to let that go and to be at peace knowing that they are no longer suffering
In that way.
in that way.
One of the things, and I'm curious what your thoughts about, when I think of the loss of kind of the father-daughter dynamic,
Mm-hmm.
it all matters in what your father represented to you,
Yeah.
right? Some people have very complicated relationships with fathers. Some are strained, some have been abusive, some have been distant in many ways and disconnected. And then there are some who've been enmeshed, some have been too close. But ultimately, the question becomes, if that father figure had a sense of meaning for you,
Mm-hmm.
what's that meaning that got lost?
I would say what was meaningful in regards to my relationship with my father, he is the one who instilled in me confidence and a sense of pride. When I talk about being like my father, representing his name, that is a sense of pride. But also, what he taught me, one of the things that I loved about my father was having pride not only in myself, but also having pride as being an African American female. He was very much into Black history and Black heritage and Black pride. And so what I lost in that is the connection to the one who gave me unconditional love. The one who, I would say, gave me that sense of pride and that sense of confidence like no one else has been able to do. And so he always taught me how to receive that from within. Not to look for others, but to have that sense of value, sense of worth within. And like I said, I know, like you mentioned, he was keenly aware, the bad rap, I would say, that often, I hate to say, Black men get.
Mm-hmm.
He was keenly aware of that. He knew that, and for many reasons, they got a bad rap. So we would joke about, like, on Father's Day. He was like, oh, don't worry, there'll be cards available. Oh, don't worry, the shelves will still be stacked because He's always thought that, oftentimes Black fathers got a bad rap. And so he, in many ways, tried to represent something different. And like I said, even with his imperfections, one of the things that I do think he always wanted to be was present.
Mm.
And so we talk about the ministry of presence.
Oh, absolutely.
Also, another thing I would say represented for me is to show up. The importance of representation in showing up matters. And so when we want to encourage on this Father's Day, as we're talking to men who may be listening, I would encourage that if you aren't showing up, there's power in just being present and showing up. And for that, it made a difference in my life. And I would anticipate that I know there are many barriers that may cause one not to show up. My dad could have given in to some of those challenges, but he didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And I would encourage him, don't make excuses. Mm-hmm. And that representation and the presence mattered. And so for me, for me as a therapist, as a minister, what has been one of the most powerful aspects of my ministry is to show up and to be present. And I must say that I received that in many aspects from my father.
I echo that exact same thing. Our fathers probably really liked each other.
I'm sure.
Because that was my father's thing too.
Yeah.
There wasn't a thing that I think that I needed him that he wasn't present for.
Yeah.
He represented a sense of security. And not security as in strong arming, but security as in knowing there's absolutely this person that has your back.
Yes.
Even when my father lost the ability to speak, but he could still drive, I held a youth conference and he drove down, not being able to speak.
Yeah.
I put up all the sound and the light for the conference. Wow. He stayed the whole conference. Sat right on the front row. Couldn't even communicate, but his presence was left. Yeah. And left things for my youth ministry so that his presence was so staying exalted.
And the fact, it's so important, these things that we're saying are so similar, that despite what others may have saw as deficits, they still did not allow that to keep them from being present and from showing up. Very intentional. And that in itself is a sense of strength and security, all in itself, is being able to be able to see that. So that's where we both connect with that presence of our fathers.
Mm-hmm. And so I think it's important for someone who's grieving their father to really connect with, if you're feeling a sense of loss, what do you feel like you lost?
Yeah.
So then you can begin to do some work around healing in those areas.
That's correct.
Right? You won't be able to replace your father, but is there some spaces where you can still heal in that area?
Yeah, and there are ways for you to make meaning out of the loss of your father. What are ways that you can make meaning? Tangibly, there are ways that a lot of people will get involved in as far as making meaning of their loved one's loss. They may get involved in a charity, right? They may start a nonprofit. They may start a cause in memory of. Whatever that, they may do rituals. So whatever those things are, I know my father, the reason why I mentioned Kobe Bryant earlier, is because one of the things that we connected on was sports.
Did your father? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right?
He watched football, I bet, on you.
That's right. So having that connection of being able to watch the games, but sports is one of the things I still do is I enjoy sports. So we may go to a game like on his birthday or on Father's Day. And that's because I can remember, I remember having this conversation or watching a game with him because we watch all types of sports. So you can do something as small as something like that, or there have been persons I know who have started charities in memory of their loved ones, organizations, ways to get back. And so whatever way that you can find meaning in the loss of your father can also help you through that grieving process.
I often tell my clients, find some way to honor the memory of that person.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
One, it's not just for them and kind of to recognize the legacy and the life that they've left, but also for you.
Yeah.
as a way to focus on something good that can come of that is here.
That's so right. I'll agree.
The other thing that I often, talk to people about is because I have a lot of people that come and they say, I miss their voice. I wish I could just talk to them. And so I ask, if they were here right now, what voice?
Yeah.
What would they say?
Yeah.
You know their voice. If you've been with them any length of time, you know what they say, how they say. They know the jokes they use. You can do ridiculous.
Yeah, they're not everything very ridiculous.
You carry that voice.
That is so
And that voice, if you will allow yourself, can still be comfort to you.
Yes. Yeah. And you can still talk to them.
And still talk to
You can still talk to them in whatever ways that you could talk to them. I mean, I've heard persons who say, I take a walk, or there are different ways that they represent their loved ones by talking to them. So yeah, it's okay to still talk to them. I know I still talk to my father, and sometimes it may, I have dreams and things like that. But yeah, that in conversation to keep them alive. What ways can you feel that you can bring honor and meaning to them?
Exactly. I mean, I have a photo album, of photos that I keep. And from time to time, I just go through the photos. Yeah. Different experiences we've had together, all the joy. And everybody's going to do it different. Yeah. Everybody's going to find for them where that connection point is to that person.
Yeah. I love sharing stories. My sister and I, or even with other persons, I love recalling our stories, sharing those times, sharing those moments, sharing times that we laugh. One of the other things that I get from my father is also, it can be in the area of hobbies. One of the things I enjoy doing, because of my father, I enjoy playing board games.
Oh, okay.
Now it kind of leans over also into playing card games, which leads also into playing spades. So I have to say, I get a little trash talking, and that's it. Slapping down cards on the table from my father. And not only has it been for me, but I passed that on to my niece. I used to see her. So the spirit of my father was raised up in her too. So those are just those things that you say, oh yeah, you get that from your father. You get that from your father's steps. And those are some of the things that, I also do for fun to keep his memory alive. So to do and honor him. So you can think of those things also that you do that brings you joy, that are fun for you as well.
And those might be the things you do when those kind of major memory days come up. Birthdays. Yes. Some special day you share with your father, Father's Day. Because sometimes those are the days that trigger us. Holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, he was the one that cut the turkey. Yeah. He bought the best gifts at Christmas because my dad, he was a gadget. We had a gadget. We are the alpha folks. We're not beta folks. We had it as soon as you had it. We have the latest gadget. You name it. And we just try to, outshine each other with gadgets. But it is whatever you're doing to recognize kind of those days and not necessarily avoid them or hide from them or laugh from them. But just allow yourself to be what you need them.
I'm glad you brought that up, because this could be someone's first Father's Day.
Yes.
After the loss of your father. And again, I would encourage you to do what you feel is best. If you want to be around family, gather yourself around family. If you say, I want to curl up in the bed with his favorite blanket, that's okay to do too. Most people say it's the first one that may be the hardest, but I also say that it could be the second, the third, it could be 10 years from now. But just know that it's okay for you to allow yourself to grieve, like we said, in different ways that you can do that find meaning, but honor where you are and give yourself permission to be okay exactly where you are. And don't try to predict it. You may think, oh, I'm going to get up and I'm going to go to brunch, or I'm going to go to church. And you find when you got up, I'm not really feeling up to it. That's okay. That really is okay, because we never know how those birthdays or the anniversaries are going to hit us. Whatever way that it is, just know that that's a normal way of responding to grief. And whatever way that is, honor those feelings and emotions that you may have.
I want to speak to two last topics. One, remembering that it's Men's Health Month,
Yes.
and men's mental health is the focus, obviously that we would want to highlight. But oftentimes when men lose their fathers,
Yeah.
sometimes they don't seek out the help
Yeah.
to deal with that grief.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if maybe, I have some thoughts of some of the men that I help in my practice, kind of as ways for them to get over the stigma or get beyond the barrier to say, hey, this is important work for you to do because you need to be helped and healed for those
Yes.
still in your life.
Mm-hmm.
What are some things that you speak to with men who might be grieving or men in general who need to take care of their mental health?
One of the things I know that has been a message that many men have heard as young boys, that it's not okay for you to cry. It's not okay for you to evoke emotion. It's not okay for you to be emotional or to be vulnerable. And oftentimes that's what hinders men from talking about what they're feeling, what they're expressing, what they're going through. And so in therapy, we help men have that safe space for you to be able to be vulnerable, for you to be able to express, and if you need to, for you to also cry, because it really is okay for men to cry. It is not a weakness because you are a human, and as humans, we all evoke and have feelings and emotions. I know also the importance that fathers have in the life of men and young boys as well. And many of the things that we've talked about as far as what do you want to represent being the legacy of your dad? What are things that you find that are important for you to bring meaning to what your father represented for you? Oftentimes that could be what he did, and sometimes it also can be what he didn't do. Oftentimes, representing of who you are as a father could be, I'm not going to do some of the things that my father did if it caused a negative impact on you. So it's okay for you to look at either way. What are some of the things that I can do as it relates to if I had a positive, healthy relationship with my father? But also, what are things that I'm not going to do? I don't want my children to experience. And whatever that is, you can begin that today. If you're not already started, it's not too late to pick up that phone call, to reach out, to have an extension of being able to connect with your children if you're not doing that, to be able to take that first step. And sometimes we need help to be able to take that first step. And so I would say in so many ways to be able to talk about it with other men, to be able to reach out if you have a spiritual leader, reach out and be around other role models, other mentors, men that you see in the community, father figures, male figures, who you would say you can see what their lives represent as being a positive impact in your community and the lives of their children. And it's okay if you reach out to them to connect with other brothers, to connect with other men who you either want to represent or continue to be encouraged by, in the fact that it's not always easy, but there are other men who are doing it, and you can be encouraged by them as well.
Mm-hmm. One last thing that I would say about that is that oftentimes, when I have men that will come into counseling, and they want to talk about that father-son dynamic, sometimes that is a complicated conversation to have, simply because the only emotion they've ever told that they could do, honestly, is be angry.
That's correct.
Is show anger.
Right.
And so even if anger is the first thing that comes up, be willing and be open to talk through whatever's behind that in your sessions, simply because at least opening that door will help you get to some place that's going to be healthier for you.
And to be able to regulate emotions. Like you said, oftentimes we're taught they're taught the emotions of anger, but we are able to help you regulate more emotions. And one of the other things that you asked about, and we want to emphasize, and men, is taking care of yourselves. Oftentimes, you're concerned about being the provider and the protector, but your children, your families, the community, we need you all, and we need you to be healthy. And that's taking care of yourselves holistically. So we advise you to go to the doctor if you haven't been to the doctor in a while, not only when something is wrong, but for preventive measures as well. We want you to be well. So in lieu or in remembrance or in awareness of Men's Health Month or Men's Mental Health Month, take care of your mind, your body, your spirit, and your soul.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, we encourage you to go to the doctor.
Right.
We encourage if you need to go and join the gym to work out and exercise and to look at your diet and ways that you can be healthier. But also, we want you to know it's okay if you need to reach out and get therapy.
Mm-hmm.
That is also important for you to be able to do that too. There are a lot of, if you wanted a male therapist, here in Fabulous, yes, please, I was there some referrals. And so whatever demographic or things that you are looking for that you think will make you feel comfortable in a therapeutic setting, we can definitely refer you to persons who we know that specializes in men's health or specializes in providing therapy to men. And there is also a group called Therapy for Life Men that we would encourage you to maybe look them up on social media, to reach out to them because it may be where you join a small group also where other men can shoot the breeze and you all can talk and be able to just share what experiences you're going through. And so those are ways that we definitely would encourage that you build healthier relationships with your children, that you are healthier as it relates to your families and your spouses or partners, and that you're also healthier and as it relates to being healthier holistically.
Well, obviously, this has just been a powerful conversation. And I hear my voice cracking a little bit, but basically, I'm thankful that we're ready to have this.
Yeah, that's the same. Yeah, I am too.
My hope and my prayer is that someone heard something today that's going to help them navigate what grief looks like, what loss looks like.
Yes.
And that this Father's Day, if that is when they hear this message, that they'll feel more equipped to navigate what that looks like for them. I want to give them the opportunity to get in touch with you if they want. Can you tell them how to find you?
Yes. You can find me on Instagram at Begin Again Counselor. You also can find me on Facebook under Begin Again Counseling, Coaching, and Consulting Services, LLC. And my other Facebook page is Erica Geralds. If you need any support, referrals, or just want to talk about what your options are in receiving that support, those are the different avenues that you can connect with me. I would love to be able to talk with you and provide you the support that you need.
Awesome. Thank you again for taking the time out to come and share with me. I'm glad we had this space.
Yes.
I'm glad it was you and I that could have this particular dialogue because we were meant to have this dialogue.
Exactly. Thank you also for having this space. I'm so glad that I was able to be here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can also hear more episodes of the Theo Therapist Podcast by visiting us at the TheoTherapistPodcast.com. You can also look us up on YouTube and check us out on all of your podcast platforms. Glad you were here today. Stay tuned all summer long and all fall. We have new episodes coming that'll be available soon. So take care of yourself and be well.
Be well.
Theo Therapist Podcast, real talk at the intersection of theology and therapy. Check out Dr. Glenn's new journal series titled Brain Dump Journals for the Busy, available on Amazon. Visit our websites for more information at thetheotherapist.com or catriceglenn.com.